Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment, we have Sergey Nazarov, co-founder of Chainlink, to discuss what it means for Web3 with banks moving on-chain. Sergey, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to TradeTalks.
Great to see you, Jill. Thank you for having me.
You got it. Firstly, Sergey, can you talk about what Chainlink's collaboration with Swift and more than a dozen leading financial institutions achieved?
It achieved three very important things. The first thing is that it proved that you can use existing bank infrastructure like Swift and Swift messages to easily connect to hundreds of chains with a very minimal amount of effort from banks, which means that banks can go onto hundreds of chains very efficiently. The second thing that it proved is that multiple chains, both public and private, can be connected efficiently and reliably for those banks to transact with each other. And the final thing that it proved is that those private chains can transact with public chains effectively, meaning that value from the private bank industry can flow into the public blockchain industry, which I think will have a very important impact on both the banking world and the public blockchain world.
Why was CCIP chosen for the project, and how is it positioned to become the global blockchain interoperability standard?
So we've been working with Swift for over 5 years. So this is the second proof of concept we've now done with them. This one is much larger, including the DTCC, Euroclear, and many of the top banks like Citi, BNY Mellon, and many others. It was chosen because it's the most far advanced technology for bridging that banks have access to. It's chosen for its security. And I think it was chosen because it has various key features that banks value, such as risk management and the ability to securely and reliably connect to hundreds of chains efficiently. So in addition to the fact that CCIP has been built over the last 3 years, taking into account the demands and requirements of the global capital markets and banking industry, it's also now the most secure and reliable bridge that there is. And it's working on production and moving value across multiple chains in the public blockchain world. So I think it was the mix of security, the fact that we had features that banks and capital markets users deeply need, and the ability to efficiently integrate into many chains easily.
Why is being able to connect to any blockchain using their existing system so important for banks?
Banks have made a very large investment in the security of their existing infrastructure, and they've trained a lot of people to use that infrastructure, which is very different from startups that have begun their entire journey on the blockchain. And so they have no existing systems that they have to keep secure or have people use. So banks rely on these systems to a very large degree, and there's huge amounts of value on there, and they're not getting rid of them. So really the only way that banks are going to be able to use blockchains efficiently are from their existing infrastructure, which is historically how the whole banking industry has worked, which is why they have systems that are 40 years old, because once you put a lot of value into a system, you're very unlikely to shut it down. And so it's very important for banks to be able to efficiently integrate from their existing infrastructure as a way to use blockchains at all. And then the benefit to blockchains and the entire blockchain industry is that if you have a way like CCIP and Chainlink to efficiently do that, then the massive amount of value in banks gets to go on chain and impact both the banking industry positively and the public blockchain industry. But I would say it's critical from a technical point of view that they use their existing systems, and there's also a huge amount of demand that they're seeing for being connected to blockchains. So I think those two factors come together to lead to CCIP, which is optimized to deliver on both of those.
Tell us about your experience so far at Sibos and where the majority of banks are today in their journey to on-chain finance.
I'm actually pleasantly surprised this year about how far many people are. There was previously a thesis of I will make my own chain and everyone will go on my chain and I don't care about anyone else's chain. That thesis is now gone. Nobody is saying I'm going to make my own chain and I don't care about my counterparties, their chains. I think everyone has now realized that there's going to be huge fragmentation, that banks are going to have their own chains. Every bank will have at least one chain. Every bank will probably have their own stable coin. Every bank will probably have hundreds of real world asset tokens that they all generate. And I think this realization leads to the next question of, well, if we all have hundreds of our own chains, how do we transact with each other? Because our chains are not compatible. All our chains use different technologies. They're on different systems. They can't even communicate with each other. And so what I've seen is both an understanding that everyone will have their own chain. I've seen people appreciate the need for connectivity and interoperability. And then I've seen a few banks like ANZ Bank, which manages about $1 trillion in assets, which we worked with to create a kind of green asset, green nature-based asset that was purchasable using stable coins that have gone further. So I now see banks not only doing custody, not only having their own chains, not only planning to do stable coins, but actually starting to make real world assets. And those real world assets being in demand by their clients. So I would say we're at the beginning of something very, very big here for the capital markets. And I would say that getting them connected to each other will accelerate that. And then getting them connected to the public blockchain world will accelerate both their use of blockchain technology and the use of public blockchain technology, really to the benefit of everyone.
Sergey, with so many banks moving on chain, what does this mean for Web3 overall?
So if Web3 is a $1 trillion market cap industry, then banks have effectively hundreds of trillions of dollars globally. So if you look at where the value will flow into our industry from, whether that's from a derivatives perspective, whether that's from real world asset tokenization perspective, whether that's from a stable coin perspective, whether it's from a number of perspectives, you see that banks have so much value and that the global financial system has such a big client base of institutions, hedge funds, individuals, that if this value flowed into the blockchain industry, even at a small percentage, the size of the industry would increase by multiples. And so I think the effect of the capital markets becoming connected among each other on blockchains and then becoming connected to public chains will initially grow both the capital markets and the public chains. And then eventually public chains and capital markets will become indistinguishable, just like we are all on one single internet. And this internet of contracts is what I think we've begun moving more and more rapidly towards, and something that I think CCIP has a very important role to play for, just like TCP/IP unified the internet. So what I'm really seeing is that banks moving on chain is basically the wave of the next wave of value that's going to flow into our industry. And I think if they do that on CCIP, and there's a lot of public blockchain adoption of CCIP as there is, then we could see an internet of contracts emerge where everybody is on a single internet of blockchains, internet of contracts, where all the chains and all the contracts are hyper-connected the way the internet is hyper-connected through TCP/IP. And this is what CCIP and Chainlink are working towards.
All right, Sergey, I appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you for having me.